On a quiet August night in 1995, an intense ping registered on a Coast Guard radar off the coast of Miami. When the rescue team took their boats out to investigate, their searchlights illuminated a massive shape in the pitch-black water. It was the MS Oceanic Glory, a luxury liner that had vanished without a trace exactly 9 months earlier. But the ship they were looking at didn't match the timeline of a 9-month disappearance. The iron hull was heavily oxidized, covered in thick layers of sea algae and structural rust. Physically, the vessel looked as though it had been rotting at the bottom of the ocean for over 100 years. The boarding party breached the interior and found a scene defined by complete physical contradiction. In the main dining hall, bowls of hot soup were still steaming on the tables, surrounded by expensive jewelry and clothes left perfectly in place. Yet, scattered across those same floors were the heavily decayed, skeletal remains of the crew. Deep in the lower decks, the rescue team heard metal banging from inside the locked cold storage. They brought in a gas cutter, severed the heavy door, and found 150 people inside. They were emaciated, reduced to skin and bones, huddled together in the freezing dark in a state of sheer terror. The Coast Guard was facing a forensic impossibility. To find steaming food inches away from skeletons and starving survivors required a total breakdown in the basic rules of biology and decomposition. This was a crime scene where the evidence refused to align with the calendar. To understand how the Oceanic Glory arrived in Miami in that condition, we have to look back to November 1994. The Atlantic Star Corporation launched the vessel as the ultimate engineering marvel of its era, carrying 400 passengers and crew. Its commanding officer, Captain Arthur Black, stood before the media and confidently stated that no storm sent by God himself could sink his ship. On the fourth day, at 2:15 a.m., a massive signature appeared on the radar. First Officer David Carter watched a shape track directly beneath the hull, moving at speeds and scales that dwarfed the Oceanic Glory. 1 hour later, at exactly 3:15 a.m., the vessel suffered a catastrophic technological failure. The compass needles began spinning violently in circles, completely divorced from the Earth's magnetic pole. The GPS screens crashed, rebooting to display bright red text reading only "no signal." The crew broadcast an emergency SOS into the void. The speakers responded with a distorted chorus of thousands of human voices screaming and weeping through the static. The ship was caught in an intense, localized magnetic field. It overrode the engines and physically dragged the massive liner entirely off its intended route. The Oceanic Glory was pulled deep into an uncharted, highly volatile sector of the Atlantic. The Atlantic Star Corporation had packed their vessel with the most sophisticated maritime technology available in 1994. But advanced engineering is rendered entirely useless when the physical environment stops obeying the known laws of physics. The environment around the ship shifted rapidly. A dense, highly unnatural green fog rose from the surface of the water and completely swallowed the vessel. It carried a radioactive glow, dropping visibility to 0 and trapping the passengers in absolute isolation. Inside, basic biological decay stopped following a linear timeline. Months' worth of dry rations in the storerooms instantly rotted, filling with insects and emitting a foul stench. Right next to it, raw meat remained perfectly fresh and actively bleeding. The crew began taking casualties almost immediately. Third engineer Marcus went to check a fuel pump and vanished. 3 days later, the crew found a locked, heavy steel box. Inside, they found his boots and clothes soaked in blood, but Marcus's physical body was completely gone. Surrounded by glowing fog and bizarre physical decay, the psychological state of the passengers shattered. Within days, severe paranoia took hold. People stopped recognizing their own family members, turning to violence out of raw terror and hunger. Then came the kinetic strike. A massive, unseen force slammed into the bottom of the hull, violently tilting the entire ship 30 degrees. The impact sent furniture and people crashing into the walls, tearing open the steel plating of the lower decks. The passengers were trapped in an environment where food rotted instantly, gravity tilted violently, and humans vanished into thin air. Without the anchor of natural laws, the structure of human civilization on board completely collapsed, leaving behind raw, primal madness. Following the hull breach, the lower levels rapidly flooded with freezing water. Chief Engineer Van powered up the heavy emergency pumps to clear the deck. Instead of pulling in seawater, the machines exploded under pressure, spewing a thick, foul-smelling, bloody liquid throughout the engine room. Driven by sheer survival instinct, First Officer Carter initiated a mutiny. He pulled his loaded service revolver, aimed it directly at Captain Black's head, and seized the master keys for the lifeboats, forcing a chaotic evacuation of the sinking vessel. On the upper deck, the evacuation turned deadly. The passengers trampled each other, snapping the ropes of several lifeboats and sending them crashing into the waves. Only 60 people managed to secure a spot in 2 surviving boats. 340 passengers and crew were left trapped on the listing ship. The 60 escapees rowed continuously through the night to put distance between themselves and the sinking vessel. But when dawn broke and the fog thinned, they realized they hadn't traveled forward at all. They had spent the entire night rowing in a tight geographic circle, navigating right back to the exact ship they had just fled. Securing a lifeboat and rowing for hours provided no advantage. Physical survival efforts are meaningless when the space around you has warped into a closed circuit, ensuring that every direction simply leads back to the center. This brings us back to the Miami rescue in August 1995. When the rescue officers tried to calm First Officer Carter, telling him he was safe after 9 months at sea, Carter grabbed the officer's uniform. Screaming in panic, he insisted they left New York 3 weeks ago. This timeline chart compares the outside world against the survivors. A medical team examined the 150 emaciated people and confirmed Carter's claim. Despite being missing for 9 months, their bodies had only biologically aged by 21 days. They had experienced 3 weeks of time. Faced with 150 survivors who possessed physically impossible biological data, the U.S. government panicked. They classified the entire disappearance as the result of a severe, localized storm, sealing the forensic files immediately. But the anomaly produced one final impossibility. 5 years later, in the year 2000, local authorities picked up an unidentified old man wandering the streets of England and placed him in an asylum. When they checked his fingerprints, they belonged to Captain Arthur Black, a man who was not found on the ship when it drifted into Miami. We only know these details today because of 2 physical records that survived the event: First Officer Carter's diary and Captain Black's heavily stained logbook, which carefully documented what came to be known as the 315 paradox. The recovery of the Oceanic Glory suggests that the ocean floor contains active ruptures in the dimensions of time and space. Beyond the reach of satellites and the safety of the shoreline, the fundamental laws of physics appear to lose their grip.